Hi, everyone. Really glad to be with you today. Getting a little more squared away here. All right. So we're actually on time for our community call today. Thank goodness. So I have some things I want to cover, and we already have some questions. Thank you. Um, let's talk a little bit about what's happening with the Earth right now, and let's talk about the physics of things, especially as it pertains to what's happening to people's attitudes and what to expect from here because things are going to continue to escalate. You know, the situation we're in time has to do with the revealing of reality. And so the word apocalypse, for example, or revelation even, is about the revealing. It's about revealing what? Well, the truth of reality. And what that does is it shines light on anything that is not going to be of service to what we might call the new culture. And so the new culture that we're here to elicit is not here yet. We have more work to do, but we have to start from the inside. So, what does that mean? Well, right now, the wave of consciousness, the black wave, which is very dense, and that, of course, in of itself is about revealing. This black wave, it's at the navel now. And so the navel is quite important. It's the entry point through which you originally received nourishing from the divine feminine. All of us have that. And that's really key here because what was there? The umbilical cord. And in this case, it's important psychologically to consider what are you giving your power to? What are you giving your energy to? Where are you receiving your energy from? The way that you receive energy, is it clean? Is it full of light? Are you receiving energy through gossip or going and obsessing about those Facebook posts? Or are you receiving energy instead through meditation, through processing dense stuff in your way? How are you really receiving energy? Are you worrying about things? Are you allowing energy to leak in your consciousness? Where is it going? How much time do you spend on the cell phone? How much time do you spend on social media? These are really important questions now. But also, who are you giving your energy to? What are the types of people around you that you're spending time with? Who are you writing to? Who are you emailing? Are you answering lots and lots of questions from clients every day and feel overwhelmed? Or are you feeling like that one family member who's going through a lot, they keep messaging you every day? These are the kinds of personal things that are on the plate for us to re examine and perhaps put aside even just temporarily. It's okay to take temporary breaks from people and from situations and from social media and from YouTube. I find myself on YouTube shorts a lot lately because I get kind of woke up in the middle of the night and my brain is always going. So, turning that phone off, getting stuff off and away from you is really key. Turning off of your Wi Fi at night is really important. I actually would bet that many of us would sleep a lot better if we did that. I certainly have found that to be the case. Um, and so I find that in general, people don't think about that anymore. They're so used to having the Wi Fi on. But if you turn it off and only turn it on when you need it, that's a very different feeling. It actually feels a lot lighter. And there's a little bit less anxiety that happens in the body because those frequencies do affect us, which is one of the questions that has come up this morning so far about what are these other frequencies from towers and such doing. And as it relates to the electromagnetic field of the earth, that doesn't really affect one another so much as the frequencies that you surround yourself in, whether it's emotional and physical in general, are going to have a dramatic effect on your cellular well being. And so that's really key too. All of these things that I'm talking about are actually frequencies too. Worrying and being concerned about world events when you're not even near some of these things that are happening, being concerned about other people's issues and opinions. These things leak energy, and sometimes it's going to the right place, sometimes it's just a big leak. But all of this is frequency. So, in more advanced processing concepts for emotional processing, which I like to encourage people to learn how to do, or go deeper if you've already been doing it. We do frequency based processing when you get in really deep. And frequency based processing is based on the knowledge that all things have frequency. So, everything, cup of coffee has a frequency, your desk, your computer. So, although you might not recognize right away that these electromagnetic fields are actually based in frequency, the fact is everything from Wi-Fi, 4G, whatever G, to, of course, all objects in existence and consciousness are frequency based. And now you want to consider, all right, what is the playing ground of frequency that I'm in? And that's the navel, that's the ocean, the sea of chi in the body. And the sea of chi is very sensitive to frequencies. So, a lot of discussion is starting to come up around from the astrophysics world around how the electromagnetic field of the earth, as it's disappearing quite quickly, how that affects cellular integrity. And this is when we start getting into more revealing about what it's going to take to become a different species, this Homo luminous piece. And I think that's actually important. But what I'm seeing with people as we build up to that occurrence, the cellular and genetic changes that will occur inevitably because of course, new frequencies from space that we haven't ever been connected to before, at least not in 12,000 years. And so that's quite a long time when it comes to our collective memory. Yet at the same time, we've gone through 66 cycles of this disappearing of the electromagnetic field and then it reoccurring. So we've gone through 800,000 years, 66 cycles of the 12,000 year galactic current sheet cycle. And there's many, many cycles at play. There's very many layers and layers of these cycles that are occurring, including your life. You have a cycle and many cycles that run your body. The cellular cycle is a tight cycle, and then we have, of course, the lunar and the solar cycles, and then the different kinds of growth cycles that each person goes through, these archetypes of change that we all go through. So what I'm noticing from the sessions I've been doing lately is something very interesting is happening with most of the people that I'm talking to. They have this very deep urge for something new to come through them. And many of you are healers, and you've been practicing healing for a very long time, many decades, some of you. And yet there's an urge to do something different, to try something new, and no one's quite sure what that is. So when we look at it in session, what I'm seeing is that many of you are going to be bringing through new methodologies. Now, why is that important, and why do we want as many people doing that as possible? We're ending this whole concept of competition at this point because there's going to be more and more, and there are more and more people who are in desperate need of healing from every level. And the ancestors are really, really coming forward. It's actually been very apparent to me this past week personally, but this is also occurring in session. So, what's going on? Well, it's actually that because we're in a very different situation, a new place in space, we are being asked to allow more quantum methodologies to move through. And no two healers are alike. You might know the exact same methods, the exact same practices, but every single healer is going to have a unique way of doing that because you have a unique essence. So, in this playing board of frequencies, of transparency, your essence is what is most important for you to focus on. Now, you may not probably not know what that is exactly. Don't worry about that so much. Just recognize that your soul is running the show. The truth is that everything in your body is electromagnetic, whether you're surrounded in Wi-Fi or not, whether you're being bombarded by stuff from space or not. You are an electromagnetic being. And what that is really consciousness. So all electromagnetics, which really is the nature of the universe, even out in the middle of space where there's nothing, there's still electromagnetics happening. And those fields are invisible to us, but they actually are the physical representation and or manifestation of the source field. The source field is the 0 point of all electromagnetics in existence. That's one way to look at source. There's many ways to look at source. You can look at source mathematically or theologically or anthropologically. No matter what we do agree on is that it's the source of consciousness. It's what animates you. And from that field, there's a unique frequency that is your soul's essence. And that essence is very key because if you're stepping into that, if you are backing up from everything you think you know and everything that you think that you are into that singular electromagnetic expression of consciousness, that's the best number one thing that you can be doing. And to do that quickly, we need to heal the lineage. And I'll talk about how to do that. We need to emotionally process every day because it's an upkeep. After you get through all the trauma trash bags, you're still going to make trauma trash bags. And you need to keep that up every day. You got to take the trash out every day. And of course, through meditation. And meditation is the stilling of the mental body in order to find and align with that frequency that is you, that's animating your body. Your body is an electromagnetic animation who is actually working in tandem with a cellular blueprint that comes from the DNA. And that blueprint is actually attracting all sorts of beings that make up your body. So each cell in your body is intelligent and is unique. Each bacterium in your body is intelligent and unique and very wise. Each virome in your body is full of wisdom. And all these things are symbiotically helping you to create this body I think it's 22 trillion times a second that your body is being refreshed into existence. And that's from quantum physics. So the refresh rate of reality is 22 trillion times a second. And if we were to vibrate at that level, you would see reality go back and forth from the 0 point, which is source, to your embodiment and back 22 trillion times a second. Now, we don't have the capability of oscillating that fast, so unlikely that we'll see that, but you can kind of get the idea that you are constantly being born of source all the time. And that means that you have 22 trillion times each second to keep deciding to do something different, to do something that is special, that is unique in the universe, because your frequency that keeps refreshing into reality, that frequency is your essence. That's the most important part of your beingness. And each person is unique. There's lots of people who are similar, just like in a rainbow. There's lots of colors of green, but each wavelength of green is unique in the universe. And that's the same as you. So, these healers, all of you healers out there, when you worry, well, there's so many healers, there's so many people doing this stuff, and you're concerned that, you're not going to be important on that playing field. Well, that's what's blocking you. You're not recognizing that that unique frequency, which is also light, it's a unique wavelength of light, that is actually here for all consciousness. You think that you're here for you, but that's not really what's going on. You're here for all consciousness, all beings, right? And that's what the Buddha taught. That's what Christ taught. You're here to be in service to all beings, right? So even if somebody attains enlightenment, they don't just check out. They continue to be in service to all beings. And that's partly why, in the traditions of enlightenment thinking, why beings who may not needed to actually reincarnate, why they reincarnate anyway as an act of service, because incarnating is hard and being human is hard, right? So my message is very simply, your specific light is important in the world. All of your judgments and your expectations, your attachments, all of your resistance, your trauma, your victimhood blocks you and distorts that light. So as you clean it up, the brighter it gets, the more refined that it is, the more it will nourish the exact people who need it most, the exact beings that need it most. And you are a specific wavelength. There is no one like you. There can't be. So if you believe that what you do doesn't count, let this be a clear physics lesson that it's actually really important that you become the very purest form of your soul as possible right now. And that's what you should be spending your energy on. So, any energy expense at this point, you need to assess, use that framework of thinking and say, is this basically something that I can be my truest self with for the support of all beings right now as we go through this transition? And these transitions see a great amount of species disappear, not just humans have trouble, everybody does. And so every 12,000 years, there's some kind of die off. And those die offs, of course, we are the children of the survivors of all of those cycles. But what were those survivors doing that was different? What got them through? Well, what got them through was to unabashedly be themselves, unabashedly go beyond all of your cultural conditioning, go beyond all of your judgment of the self, judgment of others, even the judgment of the really nasty systems that are falling apart. It's easy to judge that stuff. But we learned a lot from it. Past 6,000 years have been a very great learning curve for humanity around power. And so here we are, renewing our understanding of power. And what this means, what my teacher likes to call it, is standing in your power, right? So when you stand in your power, you're offering a very pure version of the frequency that animates you. And it's not distorted anymore. Therefore, it can reach the people who need it most. Because there's people out there who are missing that in their lives. And it's your presence that can actually get them strong enough to stand in their power. And then it creates a chain reaction. So you want it to be less distorted every day. Again, the best way to do that is to do genetic healing, to do meditation and emotional processing on a daily basis. And that's the path. It's a path that works. It's a path that's been passed down in my lineage and understood by my teacher in a deeper way so that that gets passed to us. And that's the pleasure of being able to have teachers who are part of something bigger. The torch has to be passed. And that torch is going to change a lot, and a lot more will get added to it every single time a new person takes it. They're going to make it better. And so that's what you're here to do, to take these and to take the techniques that you know and run them through your soul's essence. Don't run them through what you know. We don't know much. That's the trickiest part. And my teacher often points out to me that it's extremely hard for a seer to attain a higher state of consciousness because we often struggle with running what we see through what we know. So, constantly being in a state where I know nothing is most important in this work. And that's more true. And I've discovered that's true even beyond mysticism and academia. It was very clear to me as I finished my master's degree that I don't know anything. And that's actually a very excellent state of being to be in, because then you don't have any lenses that distort what you're perceiving. So the fact is we know very little about the universe, about our bodies even. They not so long ago, I think it's been about 4 years or so, 4 or 5 years, they discovered 2 new organs in the body, and then they discovered a new part of the lymphatic system in the brain, and they didn't know that it ever existed before. And then they found a whole new system, not even just organs, the premovascular system, brand new system in the body. Nobody knew it existed until not so long ago. So that just shows us how very little we know about the body, let alone things like the immune system and stuff like that. But this is why mysticism is kind of coming into more and more deep popularity, because it's the study of consciousness, and it's the navigation of the dimensions, and the navigation of consciousness. So, you know, if you go deep into what you think you know, then you're going to miss out on this other body of light, the consciousness bodies, these formless parts of you that come from that source field and that are unique in all of existence. So if we had a job at the moment, it would be very simply explained as you need to be your truest self. And most of us think that we know that, that we know what that is. But the truth is that it's very unlikely that we know. The best way to know is to clean up your house. So let's talk about genetic cleanup. The ancestors are more and more available than ever now. A lot of the sessions I'm doing, the ancestors are showing up, and they're pointing out some very specific linchpin traumas in our lineages. This is happening to even people who aren't even terribly spiritual. And these things are getting revealed very powerfully in powerful ways. Really specific events where problems began and then got inherited over many generations. And so the veil is thinning, and the ancestors are here, and they're saying, we want to help you get through this cycle. We want to make sure you know what you need to focus on to heal your DNA. So attend to that and do some research on your ethnicities. So if you have family members from very specific countries on either side of your family, go and learn some more about the history of those places and go deep, go into, not just hundreds, but thousands of years of history. And it's really important because first off, these sorts of patterns around trauma tend to repeat themselves. So if you have problems with attracting narcissists, for example, well, that came from somewhere. It's not just you. And your lineage is going to want to point it out and say, guess what? Five grandmas ago, there was this terrible tragedy that occurred. Or thousands of years ago during the Black Plague, these things occurred. And now that patterning, you inherited it. So most people don't come into their traumas in a vacuum. You ended up in the traumas that you're in because your DNA expression helped us create a personality, an ego, and an identity that were actually built on the traumas of your genetic past. And that's serious. So if you clear that up, then what's left? If you focus in on that, then what's left after you clean all that up? A very different version of you that is coming from the soul mainly versus your genetic expression. So the soul has its own history. People call that the Akashic Records. I think that's a cool name. I just call it the soul's history. And it comes from the beginning of time because your consciousness is part of a grand array of endless frequencies that create reality. And so that soul's history is unique and it's going to have a very interesting set of experiences. That's why everybody's a little different, is because that soul's history is unique. And from the beginning of time, even if you have people who are similar to you in essence, all of those expressions from your vantage point, from that facet of source from which you arise, that's really unique. And that unique history then gets crisscrossed with your genetic history, which is unique. Because the combination of two parents to create a unique being, which each of us are genetically unique, that crisscrossed with your soul's history makes you even more different than anybody else. So, for example, although I have 6 siblings, their soul's histories are so unique. Even if we have the same parents, which we do, our paths are completely different. And it's always fascinating to me that 7 children who were raised by the same parents in the same household could be so different. Even though we have some similarities, you can tell that we're related. It's still incredibly amazing how unique our patterning, how unique our personalities and our experiences are. And the main difference is not genetics, it's actually the soul's essence that makes the difference. So that's why you are so important in Indra's net, in the network of consciousness. There isn't any point in there's no crisscross that's exactly like you in reality, no matter how far and wide you search in space. And that's really going to be very interesting for us too. Sorry, my chicken's on my porch. I live on a farm, so hopefully they're not too loud. Um, anyway, hopefully she'll go away. So the next piece as we go forward is that you need to make sure to clean up anything distorting your essence. And that's going to be, for now, a question around power. Are you giving power to some of the patterns and the traumas without realizing it? Are you giving power to people and situations that you keep attracting that are similar? Many of you, especially in the sessions I'm doing lately, are recognizing these very grand patterns in consciousness around your lives. You know, somebody might be having gotten out of a bad relationship that was really scary, and then they get into a new one where they can say, yeah, they've had a dark past, or they have had issues too. They're still working on their stuff, and then they're realizing, oh, that this is really similar to the last situation. And they're not the exact same person by any means, but your inner traumas, all of your genetic traumas, these actually act as specific frequency denominators that distort the light of the soul in such a way that you'll attract the same stuff. So people are starting to get really hyper aware of this now. Um and a lot of the reactions at first are like, how could I be so stupid not to see this? Well, don't do that. That's not going to help. The it's the time now. It's the time now for you to see all the patterns. Many of these are hidden. Yes, they're going to be so obvious once they show up, but we can't see ourselves very well. That's how it's built. We need help to see ourselves. So it's important that you get help from other healers. The healer world, who's the most important group at the moment, are these healers coming out of the woodwork, realizing I need to do this stuff remotely. I need to do quantum healing. I need to work with the globe full of people, and they're afraid. Some of these folks, they don't even have a website. They've never tried to do a healing business. They're just dipping their toe in remote healing techniques and quantum healing. At the same time, the passion, the drive from their soul, they can't deny it. And so then you get stuck in what's called a liminal space, a spiritual coat closet, where you have to do a shift of identity. So there's two methods I want to share with you today. And one of them is, how do you clean up your genetic eth- basically what happened to your ancestors? How do you clean that up so that it doesn't distort your field, and you don't keep attracting the same situations as your great 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 grandma? And then the second method that I want to share with you is, well, how do you make sure to step into your power when it comes to doing this whole healing thing? Like, what's it really going to take? And if you're not a healer, this still applies to whatever you're being drawn to do. And how do you make sure to do that through the spiritual coat closet experience, which is a very handy experience? So, the first method to cleaning up genetics, I'm actually going to post in the description after this is done today, and I'll cut and paste the exact method for you in the description of this video. And the method basically is, you need to come up with a list. You need a list of specific traumas, right? So you might have narcissism, you might have addiction in your family line, but what? Is it to alcohol, other drugs, food, sex? You might have anger issues. You might have really specific things that you remember from your immediate family. And then you got to go deeper. You got to get some history lessons. If you know that you're Scandinavian, then you need to go and look at Scandinavian history and what people were experiencing over the past 12,000 years. And you need to know what those are and write them down. Like, all right, siege warfare, famine, plague, you know, all these different traumas. They're very important. So you're going to come up with a big, long list. And then you got to get your thesaurus out. Now you need to know what's the opposite of those energies, because it's all about polarities. And when we collapse polarities through healing, that's what makes the biggest difference in clarifying your field. And you need to know, what are you replacing? If you're going to move a trash bag set of thousands of trash bags of narcissism out of your DNA trauma that you inherited epigenetically, what are you going to replace it with? And yes, of course, you want it to be your soul, but you also want the wisdom of, all right, what's the opposite of narcissism? Well, selfless giving, selfless consciousness. Well, that's an excellent thing to have learned from the pain of narcissism, that no, we don't want that. We want selfless giving instead. Right. And that's when we start the new culture. Everybody says new earth, but that's not, well, the earth is going to go through her changes, yes, and certainly that's apparent. But what do humans make? We don't make the earth. We make culture. That's what humans do. All human beings create culture. And so the new culture is what's going to come through you as you heal this genetic patterning. So now you have your two lists. You have your list of stuff that you're going to shift, that you're going to really learn from, like your ancestors need you to. And then you're going to have your list of frequencies that are the wisdom of all of that trauma that you're going to replace it with. And then you go into a ritual space. And both of the techniques I share with you are ritual based, because ritual is one of the greatest things that humans can do to manifest new change in the physical. That's why we have clung to ritual since the beginning. That's why rituals are always going to have a place in human consciousness. Rituals take all the dimensions of what we know and make it happen in a physical way so as to manifest it in beyond you, beyond the personal self into the universal. So now you have your two lists and you're going to go into a ritual space. Now, that could be a lot of things. Perhaps you have a little altar that you have, perhaps to Jesus or Buddha, or maybe you have a fire pit that you like to do rituals near, or a place where you like to pray. And those places are places of power, those are places that recharge you. And so you want to use that kind of space for this ritual. Then you're going to open your heart space up, the heart field, the fourth dimension. And you're going to ask all of your ancestors from both lines, your mother, father, ancestry. And if you have adopted parents, include them too. If you have step parents, include them too. If you have parental figures, include them, because their patternings have affected you as well. And their deep, deep, deep DNA level frequency based patterning of consciousness you've mapped to them. If they have any sort of parental power in your life, you have mapped to their genetic patterns. So you need to include them. And they can be alive and they can also be passed away. So either way. So we ask their spirits to stand behind us. And I like to ask them to stand in spirals so we can fit as many people as possible. And I like to include everybody since the beginning of the Homo sapien experience, which is going to be for you and for all of us each, many millions and millions of people. And so those people, they get to have the benefit of you being conscious of this. And then we go through and we actually have your big long list. And this takes some time and it takes some guts. But you need to actually feel this stuff. You need to feel the energy, the frequency of narcissism in your body. It's not going to feel good, but you're going to feel it in your body. And you're probably going to feel it all over your body, because all of the DNA in each cell has the map that comes from the epigenetic experience. And so you're going to feel these frequencies. When you feel the discomfort, it can burn. It'll feel heavy. It'll feel tight. It might even pinch. It could feel like stabbing. It can feel pretty bad. You got to welcome this, because, again, these are frequencies. They can't kill you, but they are revealing all the many tens of thousands, perhaps many more sort of trauma trash bags in your epigenetics, which is why you'll be able to feel it all over your body. But you need to feel into each frequency: famine, plague, rape, pillaging, loss of children in a premature way, all sorts of different traumas. You need to feel them. This is why people tend not to do this work, because it doesn't feel good at first. But each of them you feel fully, you welcome them until you're in a way acclimated to it in a conscious way. And then you're going to get to the bottom of it. And if it's something that really scares you, keep going. Go deep. The deeper you go, the more intense it will feel. But what you're doing is simply shining a light on the trauma trash bags in your DNA experience that are distorting your field and keeping you from standing in your power. So once we recognize them and we say, this is valuable, I've learned a lot from narcissism, and so have all my family members. And we welcome all of that narcissism to be valued, but also to be shifted. And then we do a heart command. And I like to say, dear heart, please allow all the wisdom of this narcissism, or whatever it might be, in my body and in the bodies and fields of my ancestors. Allow this to be fully dissolved now. And then you're going to replace it. And in this case, we happen to say that the opposite of narcissism is selfless giving. And then you go in and you say, dear heart, I welcome selfless giving to replace all of the patterning of narcissism in my DNA and in the bodies and fields of all my ancestors now. And then you take a deep breath and you feel selfless giving. You go into that frequency and you do this as many pieces as you have on your lists. You do this 50, 100 times with whatever you've got that you're ready to shift. You have to be dedicated and do your due diligence to know what is it that you're really here to clean up and clear. And if you don't clean it up, if you don't truly feel it, if you're not willing to feel it, then it will continue to distort you and distort your soul's light. That's what you don't want to be doing. You don't want to deny yourself this opportunity to go deep and to finalize some of this. Now, here's what's amazing about this process. Let's say you go through this ritual, you get to the bottom of your list, you can feel probably pretty wore out by that point, but you've done something magnificent. You've discovered the library of frequencies. You've realized that even as brutal as some of these things are, they are full of wisdom. They are valued by consciousness. This is why the new culture is not going to be is some sort of love and light culture where there's no suffering. Learning from suffering is how this universe works. And that suffering is extremely valuable and important. If you want to get higher faster, then understanding how precious suffering really is, how precious half the library of consciousness really is, that library of frequency, those emotions that we try to avoid, that makes up half of the library. You can't toss out half of all knowledge and wisdom. Half of knowledge and wisdom comes from suffering. That's because it's dense stuff. We get put under pressure, and pressure creates evolution. That's why everyone's going through so much right now, because we're being asked to become something new. So, that grand library, the wheel of samsara, half of it is dense and half of it is not dense, half of it's formless. Those formless energies, those are the selfless giving, the kindness, the happiness, the joy, the nurturing. Those are the frequencies that we bring into balance with the knowledge through our suffering. And then the valuing of suffering, the valuing of what you've experienced, that makes you invincible. Because now the frequency comes, And you can see the narcissist from 10 miles away because you can feel it because you're not distorted. And you're like, I'm not going to engage. This time I'm not going to attract this stuff because that frequency isn't distorting my field, attracting this person anymore. And I can go this direction very happily and say, I don't need this lesson again. I am fully embodied of the wisdom of the frequency of narcissism. Now it's not out here distorting who I am. Now I understand it and it becomes part of my soul's wisdom. And my soul's wisdom is going to guide me into the right direction. And if I haven't cleaned it up enough subconsciously and genetically, then I'll learn the lesson again, but it'll probably even be a lot shorter because of the work you've done. So then you don't end up falling in for different problems again because now you've fully embodied the wisdom. Now your soul's light is really clear about it. And it's not out here you're trying to look through these lenses of trauma that paint the world a certain way. And that, what are people seeing when you hold that lens up? This is why people say things like, I feel like I've victim written on my forehead. I'm so tired of this narrative. Everyone's saying that right now because they're over it. They don't want to be distorted anymore. So this is part of the process. There's many, many layers to this. A lot of it's subconscious, a lot of it's personal. Yeah, you might do this whole process. You might fully stand in the power of narcissism and let it burn open all those trash bags for thousands of years written in your body. Yes. And then you'll have an engagement with a narcissist again. And you might find, ooh, I'm being pinged. There's something left. But it'll be more apparent now because you'll have gone through quite a lot of those trash bags and you won't fall for the same patterns so easily. It doesn't mean you'll be fully finished. So you always got to be conscious, there's always going to be a little more stuff to look at. It's kind of like, when a DNA house has been full of trash for so long, don't expect it to be magically sparkly clean all of a sudden. There's going to be little corners that you missed. There's going to be some more tile to scrub. There's going to be gum that got stuck under the countertop, that you missed. And it's deep down. It's deep down. And those things will arise. But what you'll find is that this processing is a great pleasure and that the breakthroughs that happen bring in better people because then it's a little less distorted and a little less distorted. And then people see you. Then they see your soul. And you can engage soul to soul. And you'll attract very different experiences because of that. You won't find that you're going to leak power or have people take it anymore. You're going to be standing in your power, radiating it. You're going to become that frequency that animates your entire true self. Now, this is when we get into identity cleanup. And the first step that any of you folks need to really focus in on, because many of us are in a liminal space now, the spiritual coat closet, there's a lot of people in that closet, including me. So I'll tell you a little story to sort of demarcate how to do this. But the first time I did this, I tend to struggle with the arrogance worthlessness dynamic. And my great amount of arrogance basically trying to hide behind that, hide the amount of worthlessness that I've struggled with. That's been something that I've been chipping away at for a long time. So here we have this energy, this dimension that was opening up, and I could really feel it. And I could tell that my ego really wanted to grab hold of it. And what was happening as I could feel this new dimension opening up, I could see that my skill sets, I have three, I came in with three really strong skill sets: a psychic seer, a healer, and a warrior. And each of those parts of me, they wanted to take control of this new dimension. They wanted to use it as a tool of power. And so my healer self was like, "Isn't this great? We're going to be able to heal so many more people at once." And then my warrior self was like, "Isn't this great? We're going to be able to kill thousands of demons in one go." And then my seer self, was just as arrogant, saying, "Isn't this great? Now we're going to be able to see so much more and be the best psychic in the world." And I was troubled by this because I'd already gotten into a lot of trouble not too long before this event. This was some years ago, but I got into a lot of trouble with this same attitude of trying to be the best and trying to up level, competition basically. Wanted to be the best. And I was disturbed because I didn't want to get into trouble again. And I nearly lost everything in my arrogance right before that. So I actually asked my husband, who is on his own spiritual journey, just like all of our partners or anybody that you're related to. And I asked him, I kind of told him what the situation was. And I didn't normally ask him this kind of stuff, but I had a feeling he would have a something to say because he had watched me go into my arrogance and how messy it was, and it just destroyed our household. And so I asked his advice. I said, "What do you think I should do?" And he said, "Sounds like you need to give up your skill sets." And that was a very mysticism statement. And I'm like, "You're right." Because they're trying to, like, these parts of me are trying to take over. They want power. And I'm just, it's being distorted. I am not somebody that wields power. I'm a conduit of power. And so if it's gonna, if these parts of me are trying to take control of this power, then that must mean it's time for them to go. Because I don't want to take control of an entire dimension of power. I want to embody it. I want it to move through me for the benefit of everybody that I run into or work with, right? So I thought that's a really smart statement. So I actually asked Source, what should I do? And in this case, I actually got a verbal response, which I don't get that often. I see more than I hear. But when I hear, it's like, the voice of God. And so I hear Source say, "You need to fast." And, at that time, I was working full time. I have little bitty kids running a farm. Fasting is hard when you're trying to work with your brain every day. This is my bread and butter here. So I'm like, okay, I got to be willing. I got to be willing. And that's the most important part of any of this, right? Willingness, willingness. And I said, "All right, I'll fast. How long should I fast?" And I was told, "Until I tell you to stop." So I had to trust. The other side of willingness is trust. And so many of us don't trust. Yeah, in fact, that's part of the genetic cleanup. It's probably one of the biggest things is trust, right? Because all the things we've been through have either made it easier or harder for us to trust. So here we have this trust, this willingness. And I thought, oh my goodness, what if I'm asked to fast for like 6 months? Am I going to survive that? And I thought, it's not up to me. I have to get out of the way. I have to be willing to do this. So I did. I fasted, and 10 days later, it was hard, but I was so determined. So determined. And that fasting was very precious. It helped reset a lot of things in my body. And then I got to this very clear space with my mind and my heart and my body. And that's when I was told, now you can stop fasting. but it's time for you to be done with who you thought you were. And I got up sort of close to this dimension and I could see this door. And it was so literal. It was this door and it had a sign above it and it said, "No one may enter here. No one may enter here. You can't be what you think you are to come to this place, to come and enter into this state of power that runs through you." It was saying your identity needs to go. If you're going to embody this light, this power, you can't have or cling on to or be attached to who you think you are because it's an illusion. So I thought, all right, I got to become no one. So who do I think I am first? So I got a piece of paper and I wrote down my name, my married name, all my nicknames. I wrote down all these particular parts of my identity that are sort of basic, like I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a wife, all these sorts of structures, right? Social identities. And then I started writing down all my academic identities, all my experiences and achievements in academia. Then I started writing out all my spiritual skill sets: a healer, a seer, a warrior, sometimes an alchemist, sometimes I do this other stuff, really going in and denoting all of that too. And I had quite the list. And then I thought, there's still more. I've been a pet owner, so what kinds of pets? So I've owned horses, and so wrote that down. I've been a cat owner. I thought, well, that's kind of basic, but yeah, I'm. If somebody said, "Are you a cat owner?" I would say, "Yeah, that's part of my identity." Even if it's like super simple, basic, not something you talk about all the time. So I'm like, all right, we're really getting down to it. What else am I? All right, I'm a human. Am I really a human? And then looking at, all the things that I have brought through as an identity from my past lives too. And my lifetimes on different planets, even. I included that. And so then I really couldn't get much farther. I felt like I was to the bottom of the pot. Teacher, student, all of those things counted too. And that made me feel kind of complete. I was like, all right, if I had a real page of what my identity looks like, this is it. And then I thought, well, since the place I'm going is like a doorway, then I'm going to use a doorway. And it turns out that's the right thing to do. The spiritual coat closet is a set of two doors. Here's the door to the party that you were at, the lifestyle you were living for however long. You might have been in that particular party your whole life. Now it's time to go to a new party, and it's over here, but you're in between these two things, and this door has to shut first before this one can open. This means that you have to be willing to say, I'm willing to be done with this party and everything I was there. I'm willing to be done with that. And so to shut that door, you have to get naked. You got to be willing to dissolve your identity so that this door can open to the whole new paradigm of you, right? So I said, okay, well, I'm going to do that ritually. I'm going to use a doorway. I'm going to use my back door. So I'm going to go from the inside to the outside. Now, most cultures throughout time understood this. Even the Vikings created doorways to nowhere. There's doorways to nowhere here in South America. There's doorways to nowhere, even in big, huge Catholic churches. And where I was raised, the Byzantine church, we have the iconostas. It's a doorway to nowhere. We have doorways to nowhere for a reason. Egypt had them too. Why? Well, doorways do something real strange to the human brain. And I don't remember what the phenomena is, but this is why when you go to the kitchen from your living room, you forget why you went. And you're standing there like, Oh my gosh, why did I come in here? I knew it 2 seconds ago, and then I walked through the doorway, and then it's gone. It's because doorways do a really interesting reset of the brain. So you're going to use this to your advantage. And I did that. So I used my back door and I allowed it to sort of do this very subtle reset. And then I had my identity and I burned it. I dissolved it. I said, I give this back to source. All of these things, these are just structures that I've been wearing to make me look a certain way to the world. But that's not really who I am. And I'm willing to be nothing. I'm willing to have no skill sets. I'm willing to have nothing, to be nobody, to have no name. I'm willing. And as I went through that doorway and I experienced being nothing, I thought, well, this is not so bad. Kind of like being nothing. And I just hung out and was nothing for a while, like a few days. And then something started to happen. It was kind of like you'd been in the dark for a while and then you go into a room that's really brightly lit and it takes you a few minutes to get acclimated and then your eyes you don't have to you can't see anything 'cause it's so bright, right? And that's what entering into a new dimension's like. And then you go into this room and you're like you can't see anything. You're in a new place. You're acclimating. You're nothing. And then you can get a glimpse of where you are. Instead of losing my skill sets, instead of being absolutely nothing, my identity had actually kept me from becoming what I was being asked to become at that time. By releasing my identity, I actually, instead of working in the library, running around, doing sessions before all of that was very hard. It's really hard work. I was working myself to death. Instead of working in the library, I became the library. So because I was willing to dissolve what I thought I was, because I was willing to work on my genetic trauma, I ended up not having to work the same way. Then I had access to more because I wasn't distorted as much. I wasn't running it through structures and archetypes and identities. And then all of that light was going to be much less than what it really is. And I could feel a physical change where then I wasn't a warrior and a healer and a psychic anymore. I was all of those and much, 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 much more that I'd never had access to before because I was willing. And that's what I mean by then you go to a new party. So you get naked, you become nothing, and when you go through this door, you become something else. And it's from the soul that you become that, not from your identity, not from your personal self, but from the universal self, from the essence of you, whether you know what that is or not. You do know because your soul is running the show, but you don't have to have a name for it yet. You just need to be it. You need to find that frequency, right? And so then you end up in this whole new party. And for me, it was now you are the library. Now you are the library. You don't have to run around in this library anymore. You are it. And it changed the way that I work. It made it easier to be of service, which was the whole point, right? So I encourage you, especially you healers out there and you warriors out there, to do this because on the other side of it, and you can sense this, it's inevitable. You're going to be a conduit. right? You get out of the way. You don't want to distort it with what you think you want and all of that. You need to be a conduit of this pure soul's essence. And as you become a conduit of healing, instead of being a healer, you become healing. Instead of being a warrior, you become the command of the human will, of the human spirit. You become the command of your soul's essence. It moves through you, right? Instead of being a psychic, you become the library of consciousness. And this is probably the most important thing you can be doing right now because it's going to clean up the sea of chi. It's going to help you to get clear, okay? From this position, who do I need to drop out of my life? Who do I need to bring in? What situations, what places, what things, what objects? Do you really need that particular sweater now? Do you really need that, you know, garage full of stuff and furniture anymore? Or is it simply going to weigh you down as you become more formless with less structure around who you thought you were? Your physical life is going to change a lot too. And so then it's going to suddenly be a lot easier to leave that bad relationship. Then it's going to be a lot easier to say, you know what? You're a grown kid now. You're an adult. Go do your thing. I'm here for you. My door is open. I love you unconditionally. But I'm not going to message you every day anymore. I'm not going to worry about you. I'm just leaking energy. But I'm here for you. Then you can say, hey, you know what? Let's take a break. I care about you, but I need some space. I'm going through some changes. I'm going to connect with you around the holidays. Let me go do some inner work and we'll connect later, right? It's maybe going to be the impetus you need to change jobs, to start your own business, to actually do that remote healing so you can help people all over the world, to step into it and not keep worrying about if you're doing it right because your soul knows how to do it. Your soul knows. You personally, as a human being with a personality, identity, ego, whatever, doesn't know anything. It's truly glorious. I swear to you, it's glorious not to know anything. It's such a joy to live when you're not running it through what you think you know. There's so much more joy in life because then you don't have sets of lenses distorting reality. Then it's just clear and you can see so much more about your physical space and your habits and your personality and different things that you need to heal. And instead of being beating yourself up over it, it becomes so much more pure and more enjoyable to emotionally heal and process trauma. It gets so much better and better and better. And I regularly do this identity shifting. The minute that I think that that I know something, now I'm doing it as an upkeep. And my attempt to embody all dimensions. Because as I get deeper into these dimensions that are so formless and so pure, it reveals more of who I think I am and what I think I know. And now, instead of it being painful, it's extremely enjoyable to pull all this structure out and unravel it so that it's more and more and more luminosity that's speaking and not Elizabeth. And that's how this works from here. So, in general, especially through the sessions that I've been doing this past month. There's so many new things wanting to come through you. And what's keeping you from being able to step into it is your genetic healing that needs to be done. And it's time now. It's simply time. The umbilical cord, that makes sense. The navel is opening up and it says, what have I received from my ancestors to get me here? A lot of it's trauma, a lot of it's good stuff. And you want to be able to absorb and be part of all of it, not denying and running away from the ancient trauma, but welcoming the wisdom of those frequencies so that you get bigger. You become a library too. You're just going to get bigger. When you allow that half of the library to exist in you, then the whole perfection of existence becomes more obvious. And then you need to work on your identity stuff. You think you know stuff. You do not. You think you know yourself. That's an illusion. You are an immortal soul. That's who you really are. Come from source. The more you are that, the better. And then really recognizing that, yeah, something new wants to come up. I do want to do something new. That's been a common, constant theme. People saying, I got to do something new. I feel blocked. Like, I can't just start a website. I don't want to be seen on a YouTube video. I'm too afraid. Dig in, and you're going to find identity there. You're going to find trauma from your ancestors there. And when you clean it up, you're going to say, wow, now I feel like I really can't go wrong. I just need to do it. I need to make this website. I need to make this video. I need to practice. I need to do some stuff. Need to go find some people to practice with so I can do some remote healing and really get good at it and just see what comes up. Don't assume that you know, because you don't. That's what's so cool about this kind of work, especially for you healers. Having been doing quantum healing for, mm, I started about 20 years ago, but I really got deep into it about 10 years ago. And I would create methods and then I'd throw them out the door and and I'd recreate them and throw them out the door and then refine it and refine it and refine it. And most of that was me getting rid of everything I think I know. And then just saying, I'm going to see what needs to be seen. Elizabeth has no idea what that is. And then letting that skill arise. And it can be so profound and so beautiful what you will perceive. And if you're willing to not know anything and let your soul do the seeing, miraculous revelations will indeed occur. They can be deeply validating for the people you serve and help them to understand that you are part of this great source field together. So that's what I perceived for this past month and where we're heading. And as we go into the lower chakras, now we're heading into just below the navel, which is even more about power and vulnerability. Where are we vulnerable? That's what's going to be coming up over the next month about vulnerability. All right, so now is my opportunity for the next 45 minutes to answer questions. And I'm going to back up in the chat. And, that first question was about basically, some people are really going wild. People are noticing that this electromagnetic field change is going to have a dramatic continued cellular effect on the body, which directly affects the mind. And when people are not conscious of it, they don't know why they feel so fussy, so troubled, so violent. They don't know why. They don't have self control and they're so confused. They're just simply missing a big chunk of info that they really need to be able to say, all right, this is not me, right? So they're going through this distortion. All these distortions, all these identities are being revealed right now. And that's people think that they are this stuff, right? And if you think that and you don't know what's really happening in the bigger picture, then you're going to feel nuts. So pray for these folks. Pray for humanity. Give them that love. Cheer them on. Um, and so Joe says, now there's four R's. And last time he was mentioning three R's, but he's added a new one: revelation, recapitulation, resolution, and release. And that's a beautiful way to describe these processes. I think you've nailed it in a much shorter way than I did. Thank you, Joe. Um, no, I just have my hair pulled back, Jillian. All right. So, yeah, some other people saying, yeah, turning the Wi-Fi off helps. Kelly says, does that mean the electromagnetic grid disappears within us too? No, there's just a lot of, it's sort of like we're being unplugged and then we're going to get plugged in a different way. So it's not that electromagnetics in biology is disappearing. It's that the Earth's electromagnetic field is going through an excursion, so it's going internal and it's doing it quite quickly in order to probably shift the poles that could happen. There's a long list of things that could happen that may or may not happen at a shift like this. With as much consciousness as many humans on this planet as there are now, I expect this to be very dramatic, but very, very fascinating, an amazing time. And we don't exactly know what will happen. We have some clues, but the since the sort of ley lines, the grids of the earth, they're going to be weaker, then that calls you to stand in your power more, right? And you don't want to stand in your identity. You don't want to stand in your ego and your trauma. You want to stand in your soul's power so that as the electromagnetic field comes back, you're going to be ready to plug in and align with it. And that being said, we need to prepare the way because this is going to unfold over the next couple of 100 years. So we won't see the end of it, but we're going to prepare the way. A friend of mine, she used to say, we're on the transition team. And I would agree. That's a great way to look at it. Vince is asking, how was consciousness originally created? Is consciousness constantly expanding? So that's a great question. I have no idea how consciousness was originally created, but from what I've experienced placing my consciousness out in the void, the space between universes, into the multi and the omniverse, what I perceive universes are thoughts of God, right? And the source of all things is still. So the void is perfectly still because it's perfectly balanced and there's light there, but it doesn't have a source. And then inside of a universe, it's it's often answering some specific question of consciousness. And as far as I can tell, this particular universe answers the question of what is love. That's why each universe is so different. And there's as many universes as there are, it's an infinite patterning. We're part of much, much larger meta versions of consciousness, even inside the universe. And then, of course, outside of it too. And so, when is actually the wrong question, because that is assuming that time works the same way in any of these parts of the reality I'm talking about: the multiverse, the omniverse, the universe, the void, and then, of course, the dimensions of consciousness inside the universe where things are also moving at different rates. These are part of cycles upon cycles, and there is no beginning. So we can't ask the question of when. There is no such thing. And that's really hard to wrap our head around. But yeah, I think it does expand. I think there's new universes all the time. And we happen to be part of this one and trying to discover what is love. That's at least my very possibly poor answer to that very beautiful question. Thank you, Vince. So I'm sorry, I'm just reading through comments here. And so this is probably a good question for people who do videos. What am I focusing on when I speak on a call? Um, so I'm looking at my camera, but my third eye is open. So I'm also seeing all the people who are listening live and all the people who will listen to this later. And so, although I'm physically looking at the camera, psychically I'm looking at all the people. I'm feeling them. I used to not do the feeling part and just do the seeing part, but that doesn't work. You won't do well, you won't thrive doing that. So I feel you. I'm opening my heart. I'm also conscious of the second dimension, which is Indra's net. And so I'm feeling your soul. I'm kind of going over the head of your ego and your trauma and your identity and all of that. And I'm talking soul to all of you. And I psychically see that and I feel that in the heart. And that's a good way to do videos. Took me a while to figure that out. But it makes people feel like you're really paying attention because you are. So that's for all of you who are thinking about trying to get out there with your message. I hope that you will. Cosmic Balance says, my grass is being cut right now, and the sweatshirt he's wearing says, be you. I love how the source field gives us clues, right? Day Trader Success Coach says, how's the emotional processing changed? Are we still using the same technique? Seems like there's a lot more to process these days. That's exactly what's changed. It's sort of like before you'd have to go seek out this stuff, right? And be like, what am I going to heal today? I don't know. I'm going to go dig it up. But now everything's getting revealed. So in this grand revealing, that's what's changed. It's easier to figure out what you got to fix, what do you have to heal in yourself. That's what's changed. So it's simply become more transparent. That's the difference. And it can actually feel really overwhelming these days, right? Which is why it says there seems to be a lot more to process. It's actually not a lot more. It's always been that much. It's just now you can perceive it. As before it was hidden in a different way. And so everything's transparent now. And then you're like, "Oh my gosh, it's a lot more than I realized," simply because it wasn't as easy to access. And so Janine says, I've never done anything but give my power away. What am I supposed to do with all this power that I'm no longer throwing into unrequited love for others? Well, radiate it, right? So part of the problem is that you think you have to do anything with it. It will go and do its job no matter what. So don't try to hang on to it. Understand that when you allow it to radiate through you, it'll go to exactly where it needs to go. Don't try to claim it. Don't try to identify it. Let it move through you. Radiate it. You radiate light. Power is light. Light is power. And the soul's light is what we're talking about. And so before, when you felt like you had to give it away in this certain way in order to maybe receive what you were hoping for, that's what we are talking about, the distortion. You don't have to do anything. You need to let it move through you. Don't try to package it up. Don't try to make sense of it. That's key. You need to let it move through you. You're a conduit now. So you're not going to try to package it up or make it look a certain way or anything like that. You're not going to run it through what you think you know. But more importantly, Janine, when you do allow this light to move through you, it will consistently be on constantly, it'll consistently be constantly renewed. It's renewed because of the nature of physics. The more it radiates from you, the more it will get replaced with ease and grace. Whereas before, we'd package it up and we'd say, here's my love in this little package. And now I want you to give me back a similar package. And of course, how often did that happen? Not very often, right? Which is why we call it unrequited love. But instead, of trying to package it up and trying to box it up, trying to make it the way you want it. When you drop all of that and you allow yourself to be a radiant source of light and not control it, then it automatically gets replenished from the source field directly, constantly, 22 trillion times a second, because that's the true nature of selfless giving. When you give, you automatically make room. Physics says so. You're making room for more to replace it automatically. When you try to control that process, that's when people suffer, because then they're boxing it up and they're saying, well, no, I want it to look exactly like this. And that's not how the source field works. The source field moves far beyond you and is far greater at making sure you get what you need, but you have to get out of the way and stop trying to compartmentalize everything. So that's where you'll go from here. It's it's now, okay, now I'm going to have all this power run through me. I'm not going to try to control it or box it or paint it a certain way. And then you're going to feel it. You're going to feel source constantly replenish it and bring in people who are more loving by nature and less selfish. Very good. So Alice says, is the soul's history also full of traumas? If so, how much? Is the divine soul essence as pure light and love as source? Yes, the soul's history is full of loads of trauma. But here's what happens. So as you do this cleanup of the trauma that's written in your DNA, the genetic and the personal trauma, right? As you do this cleanup, your soul takes over the house. And then you start to remember more of your past lives. And yes, sometimes it will bring up old traumas, and it can be extremely intense. I've actually been going through that the past year. And I'm like, have these past life memories with these people in my life, and I remember them really, really, really well, and they don't remember anything. And that has sucked. And it's like they can feel I'm telling the truth and they believe me, but they can't relate to it because they don't remember. And that's been very painful. But it's also given me more trauma stuff deep inside to work with, to work on, right? And not everybody believes in past lives. But here's what's beautiful: your karma doesn't follow you through lifetimes. That's a weird new age idea. It's not true. What is true is that this life is where all the juicy stuff is. So you really need to do, like what Joe said, recapitulate. It's a really cool concept where you fine tooth comb through this life. Don't worry about the other ones. The other ones are settled. Yes, they'll be very interesting. You'll remember some. You might remember a lot. They'll be interesting. And yes, you got to acclimate to remembering stuff that nobody else remembers. It's awkward, but you'll get used to it. And then it kind of evens out, it plateaus, and you feel like, all right, well, I remember because it's full of wisdom. I learned a lot from those lives. And how much? Well, how much trauma is there from the beginning of time? This is why this mindset is so important, to value all frequencies in existence. I really mean it. It's a radical concept, this whole unconditional love thing. It's deeply radical. It says, I will value all suffering. Because it exists, it is loved by source. And so then you're asking about the essence. Well, the source field is all frequencies of all possible consciousness. And it goes on and on and on. And it's the possibility of all those frequencies, even in the omniverse. And that field is still, it doesn't move. But your consciousness arose out of that. And it's a single frequency. And so that's why we say, well, I think that I am, right? I think so, therefore I am. And when you're working with that I am presence called the Atman, or the singular point of the personal self, you are born of the field of all possibility, the zero point, the stillness of the source field of source God. And then you are individuated of that field, but you're moving and you're learning. And the minute that you arise out of that field, you are on a trajectory to go back to the field one way or another. And by doing so consciously before you leave your body, we have a name for that. We call that enlightenment or being holy. Because then you feel both. You feel both the source field, the Brahman energy, the God energy. You feel the universe, you feel the void, you feel beyond all things. You perceive, yes, I am of this field that goes on in an endless way. I am of this, and I am also the individual. And so it's not about purity so much. When you do recognize that you are of the universal self, I am both Atman and Brahman, I am, and those are these ancient concepts around personal self and universal self, right? It's not about purity, it's about being able to consciously be aware of both of these things. The truth is when you finally enter into the 11th dimension of consciousness, you recognize all things as perfect. So purity is simply a frequency, as is impurity, and they are both valuable. They are both full of wisdom. So kind of play with that a little more and see how that feels for you, Alice. But you are source. You are source right now. You are not separate from source. Um, so Wilma says, it really helps to trace your family line on the family tree online. I discovered records of trauma that struck me so hard. I cried like a baby. I sat with the feelings. I talked to these ancestors, and I felt a deep shift. I love that, Wilma. What a great testimony to this work around healing that. That's wonderful. Good. Caroline says, I was thinking yesterday about my ancestral history and I realized that the major trauma of my country that happened almost 1,000 years ago in 1066. I realized that that was only 40 generations ago. Absolutely. 1066 was pretty, the year 1000 and that whole 1,000 years is rough. Very good. So continuing through. How do we shut the door? Janine says, how do we shut the door on others who are attached to us in the old identities? Like I said, just take a break. And when people are not willing to see that you've changed or to speak to you differently, you can't judge them. That's not going to help. But you keep trying to go and do this whole soul to soul technique. Imagine, zoom out when you're in a conversation with somebody. Here's a good example that happens to pretty much everybody. When was the point in time when your parents actually decided you were an adult enough for them to treat you like that? I look pretty young and I kind of pretty much look the same, except that I have a bunch more gray hair and a couple of wrinkles, but I look pretty much the same as I did as a teenager. And that did not help. So my family has had a really hard time seeing me change and evolve. Not everybody likes it. And, they want to talk to me like I was 17, even siblings. And so just being patient first and saying, all right, I'm going to just talk to their soul. I'm not going to talk in this way. I'm going to speak the way that I want to. I'm not going to fall back into any patternings or habits in this relationship. But if it's just too hard, then you got to take a break so that when they do see you and they can see how much you've changed. There is a reason why that whole absence makes the heart grow fonder. There's that whole adage that means a lot. So, what I always say is, I'm going to go and I'm going to do some inner work for a while. I plan on reconnecting with you around the holidays, or I plan on reconnecting with you in spring. And so, in the meantime, if there's an emergency, I'm available, but I need to just take a long, deep inner break right now. And they can fuss and fight about it. And if they're dependent on you, make sure that you have set them up for success so that they can be independent of you. And then let them know that you're shifting, right? But this is all very specific, and each person's situation is unique. And some people you need to cut them off forever. And there is only one way to do that, and that's to just do it. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy or pleasant, but you will feel better. You'll feel different. You'll feel less tentacles coming in on your energetic. So I just want you to be conscious of that. Yes? Every situation around this is going to be different. Maureen says, all the methods and healers out there who work on the Akashic records to change the records, is that really smart or appropriate to change the database of our soul history? Yeah, I think that's a big fat waste of time, to be honest. I can't imagine why anybody would want to do that. I think that's not very smart. Why would you do that? That's all done. You don't need to do anything with it. You need to learn from it. You need to absorb the wisdom of it. Changing records, really. How arrogant do they think they are? That's a pretty arrogant thing to do, to be honest. I'm just going to be blunt about it. No, just like you can't go change your life now, you can't change the past. Why would you want to? You got here. You got to this moment because of everything that's happened the past 20, 50, 60, 70 years. Same thing for your soul's record. You can't change a record. Anybody who says that they can do that, they are being very arrogant and have learned something very false, probably from the new age. So drop that. You don't need to change any of that. What you need to do is understand it so you can recapitulate the wisdom. It's full of incredible nuggets. Why would you go in and say, I'm going to change this trauma? Are you kidding me? That trauma is full of power. It's full of wisdom. It's a gold nugget. You're throwing it away. You're bypassing doing proper processing so that you can absorb the true wisdom and power of your trauma. Don't bypass. Truly feel it. Go into it. It's full of wisdom. Thanks for asking that question. I don't mean to come off as harsh, but if I need to call something out, I will. Maureen also says, you mentioned narcissism. We have to work actively to feel and heal both sides to collapse the polarity and gain unity. And that's exactly that's exactly what is the better and more appropriate, less arrogant way of doing things. Good. Continuing to read here. So cultivating to 5D. I like that name and I'd like to speak to it. But you're saying the electromagnetic field density is changing? Yes. So, um, little bit of a place where you can get educated on the astrophysics that's happening right now and the physics of the planet. Go to Ben Davidson. He's my age, and he's a little younger, I think, but has the Suspicious Observers YouTube channel. Go learn from him. He just put out a few very important videos recently about cellular changes that are going to be and are occurring currently. The electromagnetic field of the Earth goes on what's called an incursion every 12,000 years because of a galactic current sheet that comes from the center of the galaxy. And that current sheet is like a wave. It's a wave of electromagnetics. It's like a broom, and it also sweeps a whole lot of matter in front of it. It's here upon us currently, changing the solar system. All the planets and the sun are going through changes right on time every 12,000 years. And the Earth is no different. And what happens is that her electromagnetic field goes internal and it disappears for a period of time. Right now, 40% of it's gone. And then we get bombarded by new stuff from space, which will inevitably wipe out a certain amount of species of this planet. And it actually explains the past 100 years of continued species loss. It's not human made, it's galactic, much of it, right? It doesn't mean humans don't have a lot of better stuff we need to be doing, especially around things like plastic and poison and all that. That's true. But just as the weather is changing very dramatically, it's actually because of a long-standing 12,000 year cycle, not because humans made that happen. So this is a very different point of view, and it's very deeply science based. It's worth getting to understand and know, and then sharing with your friends and family because this is suppressed knowledge and it's extremely important. It's what we are dealing with right this moment. And we need to be conscious of where we're heading from here. We are going into the next ice age, and we have a lot of changes ahead for all of us, especially in consciousness. And then I want to point out, just because your name is triggering me to point it out, cultivating to 5D, you don't need to go to 5D. You need to open up the dimensions. You have access to all 12 dimensions of consciousness. None are higher than any others. It's an open floor plan. The first and second are just as important as the fifth, or just as important as the 10th, 11th, and 12th. But they're an open floor plan. And you, as a human being, your genetic embodiment is made of all those dimensions. So you got to open up the floor plan. 5D didn't go anywhere. You don't need to go to 5D. You're already there. To access it, you need to heal your trauma. And if you heal your trauma genetically and personally, you'll access the dimensions and you'll remember more about who you are. So the idea that we're leaving 3D to go to 5D is not real. That is a new age lie. And what is true? It's an open house, an open floor plan, all 12 dimensions, each of them with incredibly different attributes, values, and perspectives. You want all of them on. You don't need to focus on 5D. Open up all of them. And then we're going to be able to create the new culture and rebuild our new societies properly from from all 12 dimensions combined. That's where we're heading. So we're not leaving anything behind. We don't need to leave the 3D. 3D is precious. The first and second dimension need to be really understood here. Everybody forgets to talk about them. They're very important and they're opening more and more. So, likely, you've had experiences where dimensions are opening and people call them ascension experiences, but you're not really ascending anywhere. You're just getting access to more of your house. So, it's your birthright to have access to all 12 dimensions in consciousness. And I think that's a very different perspective that not everybody really talks about, but it's worth considering. So Melinda says, I've heard that if we do not clear enough, we're holding on to density. Will we not be allowed to reincarnate into the new earth? What do you see about that? Oh, I don't know about that. It's funny that you're saying, I want to be allowed to reincarnate. When actually, in traditional thinking around reincarnation, the idea is to make it to the point where you don't have to reincarnate anymore. So isn't it a wonderful joy that we're actually excited about reincarnating this next time into something new? It's pretty interesting to me. Considering that up till now everybody's been trying not to reincarnate. No, I don't think you get held back in class. That's not what's going to happen. I think it's all about what can you learn the most? How can you heal the most? How can you remember while you're still in this body? Just doing the best that you can. And yeah, trauma is really dense. That's why when we unpack it, it's full of power and then it unravels and we don't throw the trauma out. We open the trash bag, we get all the treasure out of it, and then it dissolves and opens up more and more room. But all that wisdom remains. And the more you do that, the more wise your soul becomes. And the more you become closer and closer to Source, who is literally from which all that wisdom comes from. So the more wise you get, the more willing you are to merge with all frequencies, the closer and closer you get to being like Source God. And that's through unconditional love. Unconditional love says that all things are valuable, all frequencies, all suffering is valuable. Otherwise, Jesus wouldn't have done what he had to do. Otherwise, the suffering of the Buddha would have been for nothing. And all these masters and all these holy saints, Mother Mary and her suffering was incredibly important to consciousness, and she embraced it. That's why she's been such an advocate for humanity, especially now. So Suzette says, so what do you do when you speak your truth and everybody thinks you're crazy? Do you go back to your shell and not bother with anyone? Oh no, not at all. When I was 18, I went to a party and I remember it very well because I'd had this big, huge, crazy vision. And I said to everybody, I have had this vision. I got to share it with everybody and then we can move on to do something else. But I've had this vision that sometime in the future, pretty far, when we're a bit older, maybe 10, 20 years from now, I don't know when exactly. Any good psychic really doesn't know when. You can't read the future. But I said, things are going to change so much. And all of you think that I'm super weird or crazy for seeing the things I do, but things are going to change so much and you're going to start seeing things too. And I said, and when that happens, please call me. Please find me. I'm here for you. I'll help you get through it. And you know what? That time has come. And I've got phone calls from my friends who were at that party. And they said, you're right. I'm starting to see stuff. I'm starting to experience new things. It's less about whether people think you're crazy or not, Suzette, and more about why are you sharing the truth? Are you sharing it because you feel from your soul that it's time and that it's important to share at this very moment? Or are you doing it because of some other reason? When I was younger, and I'm not saying this is what you're doing, but I definitely catch myself every once in a while. My friends know that they've got to call me out on that. My ego will take over and say, "Well, I know something and I'm going to share it because I want attention." And it comes from our inner child who didn't get enough attention. And so I've definitely been called out or caught myself even now where I say stuff at a like a dinner table even that wasn't meant to be shared. It wasn't time. And my friends will be like, "You can't be doing that. You're just trying to get attention. This is your ego. Are you really sharing it for the benefit, the selfless good of all, or are you doing it for attention?" And there's a big difference. And now when you feel compelled to share the truth from your soul and your heart because it's the right time, then you won't necessarily get if you assume that you're going to get any sort of reaction, whether it be bad or good, drop any assumptions. Just know that that information might need to percolate for some long time, maybe even years. My friends who heard me at that party, that stuck in their mind. And then later it became relevant. You don't know when that's going to be useful to that person. Don't assume, but just do it from the heart. Do it for the selfless good of all. Don't do it for any other reason. And that's key. So it's more about what is the intent? What's really compelling you to share the truth, right? And and following that, following your heart, making sure it's with pure intent and divine timing. You got to have a full body feeling. It's a full body feeling of, oh, I am actually doing this appropriately. It's a full body feeling of, oh, wow, I am meant to share this right now. And that's how it felt at that party. It wasn't done out of ego. It was just the right time. Those exact people needed to hear it. Um, and the honest truth too is that the more of the correct sorts of people that aren't going to take your power, those when those folks are around you, they'll get used to that. They get used to the light. They get used to you changing. They get used to, my friends in high school, they got used to how weird I was. And so it wasn't that big of a deal after, years of them hearing me say, "I see angels right now," and or "I have a message for you," or "I had a dream last night that you need to hear," or people get used to it. So people will get used to you telling the truth. And then it'll get validated, and then they're gonna say, "Ooh, Suzette, you have something. I bet Suzette knows." And they'll go find you and call you up. So kind of play it from that direction. It's a slightly different angle. All right, very good. James says, to what extent can we evolve our consciousness through self reflection? self-directed learning and worldly experience versus being directly led by a teacher or guide. And how do you find a teacher? So, my teacher always said, if you, and her teacher said this to her too. So, this is passed down. If you want to take it slow, then teach yourself. If you want to take it much faster, find a good teacher. Now, that teacher may change, but find one that has a pure heart and do discernment. Mentally go through the pros and cons of having that person as your teacher. From the heart, feel whether or not they are going to be able to speak in your language and speak to your heart, speak to who you are, and speak to what you want to become. Have they attained a state that you intend to attain? And then in your gut, so you got to use your three minds: your brain, your heart, and your gut. And then in your gut, is this teacher, the gut's going to know for sure, is this teacher the right teacher to get me to the next place? And sometimes we'll get to the next place and then no longer does that teacher serve. And then you seek out another. But a lot of the time, if you stick with the same teacher, they're going to take you in their arms and they're going to lift you up above their head. And one of the most important ways to know if the teacher is right for you is if they are selfless enough to elevate you, to go farther than they did. That's the sign of the right teacher. That they're going to say, I intend for you to go farther than I have. And they push you ahead of them or above them in consciousness on that ladder. They are willing to let you stand on their back so that you can go farther. Once that occurs, then you've really found the right teacher. And furthermore, they need to have had a lineage. They need to have had a teacher that did the same thing for them. And that lineage should go back as far as possible. So pay attention to that too. But that's how I decided upon my teacher, Lucia. She has a lineage. The the teachings are still relevant and true. They are, so much of the things that I share with you are very similar. I'm running it through my essence, so it's going to be painted in a different light, but it's the same information. I say many of the same things that she said, and she says the same things that her teacher said. And they haven't changed because they are true. And so that's how I have been shown how to seek out a teacher. You can only go so far being self taught, and it'll be a very slow road. Excellent. Furthermore, just to be clear here, mysticism is absorbed. You can't learn mysticism, you have to absorb it. You got to hang out with mystics. That's why I do these videos, because I'm giving you 12 dimensions of information because it's meant to be absorbed. And no, I'm not enlightened. I'm not perfect by any means, but I'm always there to point that out and say you need to discern for yourself what I'm saying, if it's true. Really think about it, really feel it. Ask your gut if what I'm saying is true. Research it, find out for yourself, right? And so that's key. Plus, I'm on the path of dissolving more and more of the personal self. And that's why I like to do these sorts of things, because that's mysticism. I absorbed how to do that. And by doing it and then being public about it in this way, we can do it together. That's the intention. Very good. All right, so I've kind of run out of time. I'm so sorry I can't answer all the rest of these questions. But Leslie, I'm going to answer your question here, and that'll be my last one, and then we'll do a short meditation here. But Leslie says, do you think humans experience emotion in the body in the same way? Is there a universality to physically feeling in the body? There is. There's a universality, kind of like we all have a circulatory system or a nervous system. There's also the system of the emotional body. Now, what makes it different for each person? Yes, there's a universality. The frequency of anger is the frequency of anger. The frequency of sadness is the frequency of sadness. But why I might feel the sadness differently than you do is because of the nature of our essence and the nature of our trauma. So if you have more sadness around, say, not being heard, Leslie, then you'll feel the sadness specifically ping or hit the density of your trauma around being sad that nobody listened to you. Perhaps that'll show up in your throat, right? And for me, my sadness, it comes from my solar plexus because most of my trauma that had to do with sadness had to do with power and not feeling powerful, feeling vulnerable. So my sadness tends to well up in a certain way in my body. That's what makes it different. The frequency is the same, but you'll feel it differently depending on the trauma you've been through and depending on your genetic trauma. So I hope that makes sense. All right, my friends, let's go into a meditation here just for a few minutes. But thank you for being with me today. It's been really profound. I really like doing these community calls. I feel like it's an opportunity to recapitulate the past month, give you an overview, make sure you know, hey, guess what? You're not alone. We are in this together. And really feel one another on Endra's net. And so I hope it's been useful to you, the things that I've talked about, the skills that I've mentioned, the processes that can help you through this time of revealing where's your power coming from and where does it go? And really getting down to this creating a new culture that will be supportive and in tandem with what the earth is going through too. A more natural, a culture that's based in natural law, right? A culture that's based in virtue, a moral and ethical culture, which will automatically, of course, make sure all the systems built from that and the mistakes that were made before get to be healed. That's what we're here to do and get that ball rolling. All right, so I just want to bring attention to the core of light, the core of light that is your unique soul's frequency. Allow it to be deeply grounded through your tailbone and the root and the perineum, the sits bones of the root chakra. Let that be grounded in, and I want you to perceive not just the earth below your feet, but the field of source, the source field. It's a still, pure light, very still. It's like walking on the most magnificent glass, and you're standing upon source, and you are made of this source, and it has arisen to move finally in consciousness from its stillness to make your body. And let it move up from your feet, creating you. Let it move through the tailbone and the core of light, up through the lower chakras and the sea of chi, up through the solar plexus and the high heart, your hands, your arms, your throat, all the way up through the eyes, the third eye, now the crown, and let that same source pour through you, pour around you, being available to all things. Let your source energy, your soul's essence, let it move out as a nourishing to all the other essences out there. And notice in this beautiful, clear, field of light, of stillness, all the trillions and trillions of beings that are also expressions of the same still 0 point field of consciousness that we call God or Source. And let's bow to them and recognize each other as part of that source. And take a deep breath. And let us command our field. Dear heart, please inform my whole body, all the beings that helped me create this body, my whole genetic lineage, my whole soul's history, all the beings I've ever interacted with through time, all the beings I'm conscious of now on the field of reality, that I am of Source. I am this essence, and that I am one with all of these essences, and that I am available, that this light that moves through me, that radiates to become one with everything else, to create the source field again, that light, I freely offer it with my whole heart as an act of love, as an act of selfless giving. I offer it to consciousness in this universe and beyond now. And take a deep breath. And I want to leave you with this statement that many, many wise people have said: I am that, and that is me. And that's more true. That's more true than anything. Good. It's just been a pleasure. All of you are amazing. Thank you. Thanks for being with me today. I really appreciate you. And I will see you next month. Pull up my calendar here. I will see you in September, on the 30th of September, for our next community call. Namaste, my friends. Have a blessed day.